A poor boy defends a billionaire's daughter in a schoolyard fight, but when he asks for something in return, he brings the man to tears. The alarm rang at 4:30 a.m., as always. Claire opened her eyes instantly, even before the second buzz could sound. She couldn't afford to waste even 5 minutes of snooze. Every minute was worth money, and money was something that never lasted in her life. At 30 years old, Claire already carried in her body the fatigue of someone who had lived much longer. This wasn't what she had pictured for herself when she graduated high school, brimming with dreams. But life had other plans, and now her only dream was to give a better future to Theo, her 5-year-old son, who slept peacefully on the mattress next to her bed, in the single cramped bedroom of the tiny apartment they called home. Another day, God. Just one more day of strength, she whispered to herself. A ritual she repeated every morning since she found herself alone with a baby in her arms 5 years ago. While the water in the shower heated, an indulgence she allowed herself only on harsh winter days, Claire mentally reviewed her schedule for the day. At 6 a.m, cleaning at Mrs. Julia's apartment. At noon, cooking lunch at the Miller family's home. In the afternoon, 3 hours of cleaning at the dental office, and in the evening, her new side job as a cook in a small neighborhood restaurant. Never a steady position, always temporary work that barely covered the bills. Claire dreamed of full-time employment, paid vacation, the security of knowing that next month she could buy medicine for Theo's cough without juggling impossible finances. Maybe one day. For now, she settled for saving just enough to afford a chocolate bar her little boy often begged for. When she left the bathroom, she found Theo awake, rubbing his sleepy eyes. 5 years old, curly hair, and huge eyes that saw magic where Claire only saw hardship. Already awake, my little guy. I dreamed I was a superhero, the boy answered in a voice still rough from sleep. Claire smiled, feeling that familiar twinge in her chest, a mix of overwhelming love and constant fear that she wouldn't be able to protect her son in such a ruthless world. "You're already my hero," she said, kissing his forehead. "Now let's get ready. The neighbor will pick you up in half an hour to take you to school." Meanwhile, about 20 miles away in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in town, David Montgomery was finishing his morning run on the state-of-the-art treadmill in the private gym of his mansion. His watch read exactly 6:15 a.m. when he completed his daily 10 kilometers, no more, no less. Discipline was his mantra, control his religion. At 40 years old, David controlled a technology empire valued in the billions. He controlled markets, stocks, the futures of thousands of employees. He controlled everything, except what mattered most, the void left by his wife's death and his increasingly distant relationship with his 4-year-old daughter. "Your schedule is ready for review, sir," announced the virtual assistant through the sound system. "Breakfast will be served in 15 minutes, as requested." David didn't respond. He walked to the dressing room adjacent to the gym, where impeccably pressed clothes awaited him. An Italian suit tailored to perfection, an Egyptian cotton shirt, a silk tie, his daily armor for the corporate battles he commanded with the calculated coldness of someone who built an empire before turning 40. While getting dressed, he studied his reflection in the mirror. He was still young, but his eyes betrayed nights of poor sleep since he'd taken on the sole responsibility of raising Helena. There was no smile on his face, not since Carolina had died, leaving him alone with a child who felt more like a stranger to him each day. "Sir," the housekeeper called after, knocking discreetly on the door. "Helena is asking if you'll take her to school today." A pang of guilt hit him. He had promised his daughter the night before, while tucking her into bed, but the meeting with the Chinese investors had been moved up. "Tell her it won't be possible today," he said, adjusting his tie, "and please ask Marcia to drive her. I'll be back in time for dinner." The housekeeper nodded and left. Used to these sudden changes of plan, David knew he was failing as a father, but he didn't know how to fix it without jeopardizing the empire he had built, the legacy he would one day leave to Helena. At 7:30 a.m., Claire dropped Theo off in front of the local public school. The boy wore a second-hand uniform but kept it impeccably clean and ironed. "Be good and listen to the teacher," she advised, smoothing his unruly hair. "I'll come pick you up at the end of the afternoon." "Promise you won't be late?" the boy asked, remembering the last time he had to wait alone until dark when Claire's work ran later than expected. "I promise, my love. I won't be late today." At the same time, across town, the private driver parked the armored SUV in front of the prestigious international school Helena attended. The girl stepped out holding a princess lunchbox and adjusting the silk bow in her brown hair. "Your dad asked me to tell you he'll have dinner with you tonight," the driver said with a rehearsed smile. Helena just shrugged, used to promises that were rarely kept. She walked alone to the school entrance, where an assistant teacher waited for her. Two worlds, two children, two parents fighting their own battles. Soon, fate would intertwine their lives in ways none of them could foresee, showing that sometimes the deepest chasms between people can be bridged by the most unlikely connections. The midday sun shone intensely on the courtyard of New Horizons School, a private institution that, while not the most exclusive in the city, still charged a tuition Claire could never afford. Theo only studied there thanks to a full scholarship he'd received through a local government program for talented children from low-income families. Integration wasn't easy. Theo's uniform, though identical in style, revealed in its reinforced seams and barely noticeable patches the meticulous work Claire put into making it last the entire year. Other students replaced their uniforms at the first sign of wear. That day, during recess, Theo was eating his cheese sandwich alone, seated on one of the colorful benches in the courtyard. His keen eyes watched the other children playing in groups, talking about vacations and toys he only knew from the neighbor's TV, where he stayed when his mother had to work late. That's when he noticed it. On the other side of the courtyard, near the red slide, 3 fourth graders were surrounding a small girl. She was holding onto her hair while one of the boys, the tallest, reached out, trying to grab the blue silk bow that adorned her brown curls. "Look at the princess's bow," the boy laughed, egging on the other two. "Bet it costs more than my entire backpack." The girl backed up until she bumped into the slide. Theo noticed she wasn't crying, but her chin trembled slightly. "Let's see if the rich girl knows how to share," teased another boy, a bit chubby, with a spotless uniform. "My sister wants a pretty bow too." "It's my mom's," the girl finally said, in a voice so soft Theo could barely hear it. "She gave it to me before she went to heaven." The boys laughed even louder. "Heaven? You're such a baby. She probably ran away because she couldn't stand a crybaby like you." Theo felt something boiling in his chest. He quickly stuffed the half-eaten sandwich into his pants pocket and marched across the courtyard. He didn't know the girl. She must have been in another class, but he knew exactly what it felt like to be cornered. "Leave her alone," he said, placing himself between the boys and the girl. The 3 boys looked surprised for a moment. The tallest one, about 10 years old, quickly recovered and stepped forward, getting so close that Theo could smell the mint candy on his breath. "Look at this scholarship kid trying to be a hero," the tall boy sneered, shoving Theo's shoulder. "Gonna defend your little girlfriend?" Theo felt fear creeping up his spine. He was small for his age, and these boys were at least 2 years older, but something in him refused to back down. Maybe it was Claire's reminder that real people protect those who are weaker, no matter how big the fight. "She's not my girlfriend," Theo replied, voice steady despite his racing heart. "I just can't stand bullies. 3 against 1 girl." "So brave of you guys." The sarcasm, a word he had recently learned from Claire, seemed to hit home. One of the boys now looked uncomfortable. "Let's get out of here, Lucas," he muttered to the leader, the hall monitors watching. "I couldn't care less," Lucas shot back, but his eyes betrayed concern as he glanced over to where his friend indicated. Theo seized the moment of hesitation. "My mom always says real courage doesn't need a group to gang up on someone," he said, swallowing hard but maintaining eye contact. "They know how to protect those who need it." That was the last straw for Lucas, who stepped back. "Whatever. Loser. That girl's annoying anyway. Nobody likes her." The three walked away, not without Lucas pointing a finger in Theo's face. "We'll see you later, scholarship kid." Once they were out of sight, Theo finally exhaled, relief flooding him. His legs were so shaky he had to lean against the slide. Only then did he turn to the girl, who was watching him with wide eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded silently, still clutching the blue bow tightly in her small fingers. She was pretty, with large dark eyes and shiny brown curls falling in perfect ringlets over her shoulders. Her uniform was the same as everyone else's, but her polished shoes and designer backpack revealed she was from a different world. "My name is Helena," she finally said, in a sweet, polite voice that reminded Theo of girls in fancy toy commercials. "Thank you for helping me." "I'm Theo," he replied, feeling his cheeks grow warm. "Do they always pick on you?" Helena shrugged, an oddly grown-up gesture for a 4-year-old. "Sometimes. They say I'm stuck up in nice, but I don't talk to anyone because—" She hesitated. "I don't know what to say." Theo understood. He often felt that way too, like everyone else had learned their lines in a play, and he was the only one who didn't have a script. "Want half of my sandwich?" he offered, pulling the slightly squashed package from his pocket. "It's cheese." Helena smiled for the first time, revealing small, perfectly aligned teeth. "Yes, please," she said, surprising Theo. "I've never eaten a pocket sandwich before." The two sat on the slide, sharing the simple snack while the bell rang, signaling the end of recess. In the teacher's lounge, Mariana Torres was typing an email on the school computer. As the early childhood coordinator, it was her responsibility to inform parents of any incident involving their children, especially when it concerned Helena Montgomery. Mariana had witnessed the scene in the courtyard through her window. Her first impulse was to run out and intervene, but something made her wait. She wanted to see how it would unfold, and she was genuinely surprised and moved by little Theo's actions. "Mr. Montgomery," she typed, "I hope you are well. I'm writing to inform you about an incident that occurred today during recess. Helena was intimidated by 3 older students who tried to take the bow she always wears. Before any staff could intervene, a classmate of hers, Theo Silva, stood between Helena and the aggressors, bravely defending her. The older boys backed off, and I noticed Helena and Theo stayed together for the rest of recess, talking amiably." Mariana paused, thoughtful. She knew David Montgomery's reputation, a ruthless businessman, but also an extremely protective father. She also knew Helena had struggled to socialize ever since her mother's death 2 years ago. This might be the girl's first real friendship. "Theo is a scholarship student at our school," she continued typing, "the son of a single mother, but he shows admirable character for a child of only 5. I thought you'd want to know about this, especially since Helena seemed genuinely happy after the incident." They parted ways, smiling when the bell rang to return to class. She reread the email twice before sending it. She knew that within minutes, it would be read by Montgomery's personal assistant, and with luck, it might reach the magnate himself by the end of the day. If anything could distract David Montgomery from his meetings, it was news about his daughter. In the conference room at Montgomery Tech, the CEO was wrapping up a presentation on the company's new international expansion project when his personal assistant, Roberta Garcia, discreetly placed a tablet in front of him. On the screen, David saw an email from Helena's school, with the highlighted subject, "Incident involving Helena, positive outcome." His heart skipped a beat. Years of training to keep a neutral expression in any situation meant that no one else in the room noticed his momentary alarm, but inside, panic flickered. Any communication from the school outside normal hours meant trouble. "Gentlemen, let's take a 5-minute break," he announced calmly, grateful that they were almost finished with the meeting. Once the executives left, David read the email quickly. His expression shifted from initial worry to relief, and then to curiosity. "A scholarship boy defended Helena?" he asked Roberta, who remained by his side. "Yes, sir. Theo Silva, 5 years old, lives in the Hope Gardens neighborhood. Son of Claire Silva, 30 years old, Works as a house cleaner and cook for different families. No father listed on the birth certificate. David raised his eyebrows, impressed by Roberta's efficiency in gathering information so quickly. How did you find all this out? I called the school while you finished the presentation, she replied matter-of-factly. I thought you'd want to know more about the boy. David nodded, thoughtful. The child's courageous act stirred something in him he hadn't expected. Helena rarely mentioned classmates or friends, and knowing she'd been bullied by older children filled him with a protective anger he had to suppress. I want to thank this boy personally, he decided. Arrange a meeting with him and his mother. Roberta looked surprised for a moment, but swiftly regained her professional composure. Should I invite them to lunch on Saturday at your residence, or would you prefer a more formal meeting here at the office? David thought for a moment. A meeting at the office would be too impersonal, but bringing strangers to his home wasn't his usual practice either. At the house, he decided at last, but not lunch. That might be intimidating. An afternoon coffee. Something simple. Helena will be there, of course. I'll send the invitation today, sir. Claire listened to Theo's story as they walked home. The boy excitedly recounted his new friend Helena and how he had faced down some big kids to defend her. Then I said that real brave people don't attack in a group, just like you always tell me, Mom. Claire smiled, running her hand through her son's hair. Her little man always trying to do the right thing, even when it meant putting himself in danger. I'm proud of you, Theo, she said, but also worried. Those older kids might come after you now. I'm not scared, he said, puffing out his chest. Helena is really nice, Mom. She'd never eaten a pocket sandwich before. Can you believe that? Claire laughed, wondering what kind of child Helena might be, so impressed by life's simplest things. They were nearing home when her phone rang. Claire found it strange. Few people had her number, generally just the people she worked for temporarily. Hello? Good afternoon. May I speak with Ms. Claire Silver? Asked a female voice, polished and professional. Yes, this is she. My name is Roberta Garcia, personal assistant to Mr. David Montgomery. I'm calling on his behalf to invite you and your son, Theo, for coffee at his residence this Saturday at 4 p.m. He'd like to personally thank your son for helping his daughter Helena at school today. Claire stopped on the sidewalk, so stunned she almost dropped the phone. Theo looked at her, curious. David Montgomery? She repeated in disbelief. The owner of Montgomery Tech. She knew the name, of course. Everyone did. He was a regular in business news, one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. Claire never imagined that Helena, the pocket sandwich girl, was his daughter. Exactly, Mrs. Silver. Mr. Montgomery heard about the school incident and wants to meet the brave boy who defended his daughter. May we confirm your attendance? Claire hesitated. What would a billionaire want with her and Theo? It was odd, intimidating. Her mind raced through all possible scenarios, from Montgomery offering some kind of reward to him, somehow reprimanding Theo for getting involved with his daughter. Why would a rich man like him bother to meet people like them? Mom, who is it? Theo tugged on her sleeve and curious. Covering the phone, Claire said, It's about Helena, your friend. Her dad wants to meet us. Theo's face lit up. Let's go, Mom. I want to show Helena my bottle cap collection. It was her son's genuine excitement that convinced her. What did she have to lose after all? If Montgomery truly was grateful, maybe it was just a polite gesture. And if he had other intentions, well, Claire wasn't naive. She'd protect her son if needed. All right, she finally answered. We'll be there on Saturday. She hung up, still feeling dazed by the surreal situation. Her 5-year-old had befriended the daughter of a billionaire, and now they were invited to coffee at his mansion. Life sometimes took unexpected turns, Claire thought, but not even in her wildest dreams could she have imagined that one simple act of Theo's courage would open the door to a world so distant from their own, a world that, until that phone call, she believed existed only in magazines or on TV screens. Saturday came faster than Claire would have liked. After trying on and discarding all 3 of her best outfits, she chose a simple navy blue dress, her go-to for job interviews, and a pair of black flats, a bit worn but still decent. For Theo, she picked the jeans without patches, the white shirt he wore for school events, and sneakers she'd bought last month on a spectacular sale. "Do I look good, Mum?" asked Theo, trying to tame his curly hair in the tiny bathroom mirror. Claire smiled, her heart clenching at her son's effort to appear presentable. He was so excited to see his new friend again that he barely slept the night before. "You look great, my prince," she said, helping with his unruly hair. "But remember what we talked about. We'll just thank Helena's dad for inviting us, tell him you were happy to help, and then we'll go." "We shouldn't stay long." Theo nodded, but his bright eyes betrayed that he'd hardly listened to his mother's words. In his 5-year-old mind, he was about to visit an enchanted castle where his new friend lived. At precisely 3:30 p.m., the car Montgomery had sent pulled up outside the low-rent building, where Claire rented her tiny apartment. A uniformed driver stepped out and opened the rear door of a luxurious black SUV. "Ms. Silver," he asked politely, "I'm Paul, Mr. Montgomery's driver. I'll be taking you to his home." Neighbors passing by stared curiously at the car and at Claire and Theo, as though they were celebrities. Claire felt a mix of embarrassment and unease. This was not her world, and she felt as if she were about to step into a play without having rehearsed her lines. During the nearly 40-minute drive, Theo pressed his face against the window, mesmerized by the interior of the vehicle. "Look, Mum, there's a TV in here." And then by the gradual change in the urban landscape. As they left the city center, buildings gave way to increasingly larger homes with tall walls and lush trees. When the SUV finally passed through a wide electronic gate and followed a driveway lined with royal palms, Claire had to fight not to let her jaw drop. The house, if such a word could describe it, was imposing. A 3-story mansion with a light stone facade and broad windows, surrounded by gardens so manicured they looked like something out of a home design magazine. "We've arrived," the driver announced, parking at the foot of a staircase leading to the main entrance. "Mr. Montgomery is waiting for you in the tea lounge." Claire took a deep breath, straightened her dress for what felt like the 100th time, and held Theo's hand. "Remember, son, mind your manners above all else." In the tea lounge on the eastern wing of the mansion, David Montgomery checked his watch. It was exactly 2 minutes before 4 p.m., the time scheduled for his guest's arrival. Helena, seated on the couch beside him, swung her legs in the air, showing an unusual restlessness for a girl who was typically so reserved. "Daddy, do you think Theo will like my playroom?" she asked for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. David smiled slightly, still surprised by his daughter's enthusiasm. Since her mother's death, Helena rarely showed interest in making friends. She preferred the company of adults, nannies, private tutors, or her own father on the rare occasions they spent time together. Seeing her like this, so eager to share her toys with another child, stirred up both joy and a slight pang of jealousy he would never admit to feeling. "I'm sure he'll love it, sweetheart," he replied, adjusting the blue bow in her hair, the same bow that had started this unusual meeting. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, followed by discreet footsteps from the housekeeper heading to the main entrance. Moments later, Margaret, the housekeeper, appeared at the lounge door. "Sir, your guests have arrived." David stood, straightening the navy blazer over his white shirt. He'd chosen a less formal look so as not to intimidate his visitors. "Please, show them in." Helena also stood, smoothing her satin dress and standing with the poise of a little lady, exactly as she'd been taught. When Claire and Theo entered the lounge, the contrast between the two worlds was more striking than David had anticipated. The woman was young, probably the same age as his assistant Roberta, around 30. But while Roberta displayed the polished confidence of someone used to corporate settings, Claire Silver seemed ready to apologize for merely existing. Even so, there was a quiet dignity in her direct gaze and the firm set of her shoulders, an inner strength David hadn't expected. The boy, Theo, was even smaller than Helena, making his courageous defense of the girl that much more impressive. He had dark, curly hair and lively eyes that scanned the luxurious surroundings with barely contained wonder, his face breaking into a big smile when he spotted Helena. "Welcome to my home," David said, walking over to greet them, extending his hand first to Claire. "I'm David Montgomery. It's a pleasure to meet you both." Claire shook his hand with a firm grip, despite a slight tremor. "Claire Silver, thank you for inviting us, Mr. Montgomery. Please, just call me David." He then crouched down to Theo's level and extended his hand as if the boy were an adult closing a business deal. "And you must be Theo, my daughter's hero." The boy looked at the outstretched hand, then at his mom, who nodded slightly, and then shook David's hand with comical seriousness. "Helena!" Theo called, waving with his free hand. The formal tension broke as Helena, forgetting her etiquette training, ran to Theo and hugged him as if they were lifelong friends. Theo's face showed brief surprise before breaking into a wide grin. "I brought something for you," Theo said, reaching into his pants pocket and pulling out something small and shiny. "It's my prettiest bottle cap. It's blue just like your bow." Helena took the metal soda cap as if it were a precious jewel, her eyes glowing. "Thank you. I'm going to keep it forever." Claire gave David an embarrassed glance, clearly worried about the modest gift. But to her surprise, the billionaire was smiling, genuinely touched by the children's spontaneous interaction. "Please, have a seat," David invited, pointing to the sofas around an elegant coffee table laden with tea, juice, coffee, and an impressive array of sweet and savory treats. "Make yourselves comfortable." Claire perched on the edge of a sofa, her back stiff as if she were at a job interview, while Theo settled in next to Helena without ceremony. The girl immediately began showing him an illustrated book she'd chosen specially for the occasion. "Would you like some tea or coffee?" David offered. "A cup of coffee, please," Claire accepted, watching with a mix of pride and worry as Theo pointed to a chocolate-covered treat. "Theo, remember to ask first." "He can have whatever he'd like," David reassured her, pouring her coffee. "Helena also wants to show him her collection of books. Perhaps they can spend some time in the playroom upstairs while we chat." Claire hesitated. The idea of letting Theo roam around alone in this huge house made her anxious, but she couldn't ignore her son's hopeful look. "If it's no trouble." "Not at all. Margaret will keep an eye on them." David called the housekeeper and asked her to take the children to the upstairs playroom. Helena, brimming with excitement, grabbed Theo's hand and practically dragged him out of the lounge, promising to show him the train that runs along the wall by itself. Once they were alone, an awkward silence filled the space. Claire sipped her coffee, politely complimented the drink, and waited for David to explain the real reason for his invitation. "Your daughter is lovely," she ventured, attempting to break the ice. "Thank you," he replied. "I confess I rarely see her so excited about someone's visit. Helena has always been a reserved child, especially after we lost her mother." "I'm so sorry," Claire said sincerely. She knew all too well what it was like to raise a child alone, though her situation was entirely different. "Losing a parent is hard for any child," David nodded, studying her intently. Something about the straightforward simplicity of this woman intrigued him. No pretense, no attempts to impress him or appear to be something she wasn't, a rarity in his world of carefully crafted facades. "I wanted to thank you personally for what your son did," he said finally, getting straight to the point. "The school coordinator told me how he stood up to older kids to defend Helena. It was a courageous act many adults wouldn't dare." Claire smiled, the first genuine smile since arriving. "Theo has a strong sense of justice, sometimes too strong for his own good. He must get that from his mother," David observed. The remark caught Claire off guard. She looked away, suddenly conscious of the social chasm between them. What could a man like David Montgomery know about the life lessons she tried to instill in Theo? About the importance of having integrity when you have nothing else? "I try to teach him what's right," she replied simply. It's not always easy. I believe it isn't, David agreed, leaning forward slightly. Listen, Ms. Silver? Claire, please. Claire, he corrected with a slight smile. I'll be direct. What your son did touched not only Helena, but me as well. I'd like to give something back in return. Claire's body tensed. So that was it. He wanted to offer money, some sort of reward. The thought bothered her. She didn't want Theo to learn that good deeds should be paid for. There's no need, Mr. Montgomery. Theo only did what was right. David, he reminded her, and I know it's not necessary. It's something I want to do, not for what your son did, but for who he is, and who you helped him become. Before Claire could protest again, the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted them. Theo came running back, followed by Helena and the housekeeper, who seemed out of breath trying to keep up with the children. Mom, Helena has a whole room full of toys, and a train that runs by itself, and books up to the ceiling. Claire smiled, relieved by the interruption. That's wonderful, honey. Did you remember to say thank you? Uh-huh. Theo nodded, eyes still wide with excitement. She even has a huge backyard with a swing set. David watched the scene with interest, an idea forming in his mind. Perhaps there was a better way to show his appreciation, one that would benefit everyone involved. Theo, he called, standing and going over to the boy. Again, he crouched down, meeting the child's eyes. You did something very special for my daughter, and I'd like to thank you in some way. What do you want as a reward? Claire opened her mouth to protest, but something in David's expression stopped her. He seemed genuinely curious about the child's answer, without the condescending tone adults often take with kids. Theo looked at his mother, then at Helena, and finally straight into David's eyes. Without hesitation, he answered, I want a job for my mom. A deafening silence followed. Claire felt her face burn with shame. Of all the things Theo could have asked for, toys, games, even money, he had asked for something that revealed just how precarious their life was, something she had always tried to hide from him. Theo, Claire finally managed, her voice trembling. You shouldn't ask that. Mr. Montgomery didn't mean... She stopped when she saw David's expression. The man looked as though he'd taken a punch to the gut. His eyes, suddenly moist, were fixed on the boy with unsettling intensity. Why do you want a job for your mother? He asked, his voice oddly husky. You could have asked for any toy, anything for yourself. Theo shrugged, as if the answer were obvious. Because Mom works at a bunch of different places and always comes home tired. Sometimes she cries when she thinks I'm asleep. The boy looked at his mother adoringly. If she had a good job, she could spend more time with me, and she wouldn't cry anymore. A tear slid down David's face before he could stop it. He quickly wiped it away, but not before Claire noticed. His reaction shook her. What was it about a child's simple words that could move a man like David Montgomery to tears? I think we should go, Claire said abruptly, standing up. The whole situation made her extremely uncomfortable. Thank you for having us, Mr. Montgomery. We've imposed enough. David also stood, regaining his composure with visible effort. Please, don't leave yet. I'd really like to consider Theo's request. That's not necessary, Claire insisted, blushing even more. He shouldn't have asked for that. We didn't come here to... I know that, David interrupted firmly. And that's exactly why I want to help. It's not charity, Claire. It's an opportunity. For all of us. Something in the way he said all of us made her hesitate. It didn't sound like a practiced speech from a rich man wanting to do his good deed of the day. Please stay a bit longer, Helena pleaded, grabbing Theo's hand. I haven't even shown him my dinosaur books yet. How could she resist the hopeful looks of both children? Claire reluctantly agreed to stay just one more hour. David asked Margaret to take the children back to the playroom, promising Theo he would seriously consider his request. Once they were alone, David apologized for his emotional reaction. I'm sorry about that moment, he said, pouring himself more coffee to buy time and gather his thoughts. Your son's word struck a chord with something I've been thinking about for a while. There's no need to explain, Claire replied, still embarrassed. And please, Ignore Theo's request. He's just a child. He doesn't understand how the real world works. David studied her for a long moment. Maybe he understands it better than we do. That night, after Claire and Theo were driven home in the same luxurious car, David Montgomery stayed awake in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched on the desk. Staring out at the vast, well-lit garden, he was deep in thought. The simplicity of Theo's request had shaken him more than he cared to admit. I want a job for my mom. Not a toy, not money, not something for himself. He just wanted to see his mother happier, less exhausted. That pure intention was something David hadn't encountered for years in his business world, where every display of generosity came wrapped in ulterior motives. How many people in his life approached him without wanting something in return? How many genuine connections had he formed since becoming a billionaire? The uncomfortable truth was that even his closest relationships were, in some way, transactional. His thoughts wandered back to the moment he met Carolina, his late wife. She had been different, authentic, direct, uninterested in his fortune. But after she passed, David had sealed himself in a cocoon of work and responsibilities, pushing everyone away, including Helena. Am I doing this right? He murmured to himself, thinking of his daughter. Helena rarely smiled the way she had while playing with Theo. She rarely showed such enthusiasm, such life. He picked up his phone and called Roberta. Even though it was nearly midnight, his assistant answered on the first ring. I need you to investigate Claire Silver. Everything about her, work history, financial situation, education. I want to know who she really is. Certainly, sir. By when do you need this information? Tomorrow morning. After hanging up, David continued his nighttime vigil, recalling the proud look in Claire's eyes when she talked about her son, the dignity with which she faced her struggles, the genuine embarrassment when Theo asked him for a job on her behalf. There was no deceit in her, no attempt at manipulation. Just a mother protecting her son and her pride. In a world where everything had a price, that was priceless. Roberta's report arrived punctually at 8 a.m. the next day, Sunday. David read it over breakfast while Helena was still asleep. Claire Silver, 30 years old, born in a small town. She dropped out of college in her junior year to care for her ailing mother. After her mother's death, she worked as an administrative assistant for 2 years until the company folded during an economic crisis. Since then, she'd lived off temporary jobs. Theo had been born 5 years prior. The report mentioned no father, confirming Claire had raised him alone. What impressed David most were the smaller details. Claire had excellent references from all her temporary employers. Words like organized, efficient, discreet, reliable appeared repeatedly. She was also taking online accounting courses late at night, using free Wi-Fi from a cafe near her apartment, since she couldn't afford her own internet. A fighter, David thought. His decision was already made when he picked up the phone to call Claire. She answered in a groggy voice. It was Sunday, likely her only day to rest. Sorry for waking you, David began, but I need to tell you something important. I'd like to offer you a proposal. What kind of proposal? Claire asked, suddenly alert. A job at my company. As my personal secretary. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that David thought the call had dropped. Why? Came the cautious question at last. Because my current secretary is being promoted, and I need someone I can trust, someone organized, efficient, and above all, genuine. Your son showed me that you're that kind of person. Mr. Montgomery. David, she corrected herself. I don't have experience in that kind of job. I never finished college. I don't know your world. But you can learn, he replied simply. Skills can be taught, Claire. Character can't. Silence again, this time shorter. What would happen to Theo while I'm at work? The question didn't surprise David. It was exactly what he expected from a dedicated mother. Helena goes to school full-time at the same place. Theo can as well, with all costs covered as part of your benefits. And on days you need to stay later, we have a recreation room at the company where the kids can wait. He could hear Claire's hesitant breathing, imagining her searching for any hidden traps or motives. But there were none. At least, not the kind she might suspect. "May I think about it?" she asked at last. "Of course," David agreed. "But I'd like you to start tomorrow, if possible. The salary will be competitive, with full benefits. And if you don't like the job after 3 months, I promise to help you find another position." Again, silence. David could almost hear Claire's mental gears spinning as she weighed risks and opportunities. "I accept," she finally said, "but on one condition." David smiled. There it was, the spirit he'd seen in her eyes, which is that it's clear I'm going to work to earn my salary. This isn't charity and it's not a favor. If I'm not good enough, you can fire me just like any other employee. "Deal," David agreed, feeling a growing respect for this woman. "Roberta will send you all the details by email today. Welcome to Montgomery Tech, Claire." When Claire ended the call, she saw Theo standing in the doorway of their tiny bedroom, still in his pajamas, his curly hair even more tousled than usual. "Who was it, Mom?" Claire sat on the bed, still processing what had just happened. How could she explain to a 5-year-old that his impulsive request had apparently changed their lives? "It was Helena's dad," she replied, pulling him closer to sit next to her. "He offered me a real job. Theo, a steady job, with benefits and everything." The boy's eyes went wide with excitement. "Just like I asked for. It worked." Claire couldn't help but laugh at the simplicity of a child's perspective, like asking for jobs from billionaires was as natural as asking for ice cream. "It seems so, son. It worked. And you won't have to work a bunch of places anymore. You can pick me up from school every day." The hope in Theo's voice made Claire's chest tighten. How long had her son carried that worry, wishing she didn't have to work so much? "I'll be able to do a lot more than that, my love," she said, pulling him into a tight hug. "And you'll get to see Helena every day, too." Theo leapt off the bed, jumping with joy. "I'm going to tell her. She'll be so happy." As her son ran off to the bathroom, chattering about how awesome it would be to see his friend every day, Claire stayed on the bed, a mix of gratitude and apprehension washing over her. She was about to enter a completely different world, one she wasn't prepared for. So many ways it could go wrong, but also a chance, maybe her only chance, to finally give Theo the stability he deserved. "I can do this," she promised herself, standing up with renewed determination. "I'll prove my worth." Across town in the same mansion they'd visited the day before, Helena jumped with joy when she heard that Theo would be at her school and that his mom would be working with her dad. David watched his daughter's excitement with a strange warmth in his chest, a sense that he'd just made a decision that would change far more than just his corporate structure. And for the first time in years, that didn't worry him. In fact, it felt surprisingly right. On the first day of her new job, Claire woke before the alarm went off. She spent nearly an hour deciding what to wear among the few clothes she owned, finally settling on the same navy blue dress she'd worn when visiting David's mansion. It wasn't ideal for a corporate environment, but it was her best option. "Mom, are you nervous?" Theo asked over their hurried breakfast. Claire smiled, trying to hide the anxiety swirling in her stomach. "Just a little, son. It's normal to be nervous when you start something new. Helena told me her dad's building is the tallest in the city, and you can see everything from the top." "Well, let's find out if that's true." The driver David sent arrived exactly at 7 a.m. In the back seat, Claire mentally reviewed the instructions Roberta had emailed the day before. Her work schedule, the location of her desk, her initial tasks. Next to her, Theo could hardly sit still, excited to ride in the same car that would pick up Helena. When they stopped in front of Montgomery Tech's imposing building, 32 floors of glass and steel reflecting the morning sun, Claire felt reality settle in. This wasn't her world. What was she doing here? "Good luck, Mom," Theo said. kissing her cheek before heading off with the driver to meet Helena at school. Claire took a deep breath and entered the lobby. The security guard at the reception desk asked for her ID, typed something into the computer, and handed her a temporary badge. 18th floor, Ms. Silva. Ms. Garcia is expecting you. The panoramic elevator soared upward, making her stomach lurch. When the doors opened, she found herself in a spacious, elegant area with glass walls, minimalist furniture, and people walking around with a sense of purpose. Roberta Garcia greeted her with a professional smile. "Welcome, Claire. Shall we start the tour?" The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of information, locations of conference rooms, how the internal communication system worked, security protocols, introductions to dozens of people whose names Claire struggled to remember. "This will be your workstation," Roberta said, pointing to a sleek desk strategically positioned between David's office and the main corridor. "You'll control access to the president, manage his schedule, and filter his communications. Essentially, you're the gatekeeper between David and everyone else." Claire nodded, eyeing the top-of-the-line computer, the multi-line phone, and the corporate tablet on the immaculate desk. "I'm afraid I'm not very experienced with some of this equipment," she admitted, determined to be honest from the start. "Don't worry," Roberta said. "We have a 1-month transition. I'll continue as David's executive secretary while I train you to take over my duties. After that, I'll move to my new role as director of operations." At that moment, David's office door opened and he emerged with a welcoming smile. "Claire, glad you're here. How was Theo's first morning at school?" "He was very excited, sir." "David," Claire corrected herself, remembering his request to use his first name. "Excellent. Helena wouldn't stop talking about him since yesterday." He glanced at his watch. "We have a meeting in 5 minutes, Roberta. Claire can join us to get a feel for the dynamics." The meeting was with the marketing team, and Claire sat quietly in a corner, closely observing how Roberta took notes, anticipated David's needs, and managed the flow of information. It was far more than just answering phones. It was practically being an extension of the president himself. During this meeting, Claire noticed the first curious glances, not from David or Roberta, but from other executives who occasionally looked her way, with expressions ranging from thinly veiled curiosity to overt skepticism. One woman in particular, introduced as Camila Vasquez, the marketing director, gave Claire a condescending smile whenever she mentioned terms like target audience and brand awareness, as though doubting Claire's ability to understand. Claire kept her face neutral, but inside she felt her insecurities flare. She was clearly out of place here. Her clothes, her manner, her background, everything screamed that she didn't belong in this environment of power and sophistication. Back at David's reception area afterward, Roberta started explaining the scheduling system. Claire tried hard to absorb every detail, but her mind was still stuck on that meeting and those looks. "Is everything okay?" Roberta asked, noticing her distraction. "Yes, sorry. It's just a lot to take in at once." Roberta watched her for a moment, then closed the door and spoke in a low voice. "Look, Claire, I'll be direct. Some people here aren't happy about your hiring." Claire felt her face heat up. "I can imagine. It's not personal. It's just that David has never hired someone without corporate experience for such a close role. Some think it was impulsive on his part." "He did it because of my son," Claire said, swallowing her pride. "I know I don't have the usual qualifications, but I promise I'll learn fast." "I'm not questioning your ability," Roberta clarified. "I just want you to be prepared. Not everyone will be friendly or patient. Some might even try to undermine you." Claire nodded, internally grateful for Roberta's frank warning. "Why are you telling me this?" Roberta shrugged. "Because I've been in your shoes. Not exactly the same, but I know what it's like to be underestimated. And because David saw something in you, I trust his judgment." Lunch was another uncomfortable moment. Claire had planned to eat alone, maybe bring a homemade sandwich the next day to save money, but Roberta insisted on showing her the executive restaurant on the 25th floor. "It's part of your benefits," Roberta explained. "No extra cost." The restaurant looked like something out of a luxury magazine, with a panoramic view of the city and a sophisticated menu. Claire chose the simplest dish she could find, conscious of the stares from nearby tables. "Don't let them intimidate you," Roberta advised, seeing her unease. "They test every newcomer, no matter who it is." "But especially someone like me," Claire added quietly. Roberta didn't deny it. She just offered a half smile. "Use it to your advantage. Let them underestimate you. The surprise will be greater when they realize they're wrong." At the adjacent table, Claire clearly heard Camila Vasquez whisper to a colleague, "The new secretary can barely handle the scheduling software. They say David hired her as a favor to his daughter's little friend." Claire pretended not to hear, but the words stung more than she cared to admit. The afternoon was just as intense. At one point, when Roberta had to step out to handle an external matter, David called Claire directly into his office. "So, how's your first day going?" Claire hesitated, unsure how much of her insecurity to reveal. "I'm learning a lot, sir." "David," he reminded her automatically. "Any specific difficulties?" "The scheduling system is more complex than I expected," Claire admitted, opting for honesty. "But I'm taking notes and practicing whenever I get a chance." David watched her closely, and Claire had the uneasy feeling that he saw far more than she revealed. "It's not just the system, is it? People aren't making it easy for you." Claire looked away. "It's understandable. I'm a stranger here." "Look at me, Claire," she obeyed, surprised by the seriousness in his tone. "If anyone is intentionally hindering your work or disrespecting you, I want to know. I don't tolerate that in my company." "It's nothing specific," Claire said quickly. "Just looks, whispers." "I can deal with it," David sighed, leaning back in his chair. "When I started in this industry, I got a lot of looks too. I was too young, too inexperienced, too ambitious. People love to label and limit others." He paused. "You know how I overcame it?" Claire shook her head. "I worked harder and smarter than all of them. Not to prove my value to them, but to myself." For the first time that day, Claire felt a genuine connection to this alien world. The idea of working hard to prove her worth to herself. She understood that perfectly. "Thank you for the advice," she said, managing a small smile. "I'll do my best." "I'm sure you will," David replied. "And Claire, don't try too hard to fit in. It was your authenticity that impressed me, not your ability to mimic others." In the weeks that followed, Claire settled into a routine. She arrived an hour early every day to practice on the system before the hustle of the day began. She stayed late, studying reports and documents to get familiar with corporate language. On weekends, she took online courses about productivity tools, while Theo played under the watchful care of the housekeeper at David's mansion, often alongside Helena. Gradually, things began to change. Her natural sense of organization, once applied to juggling multiple cleaning jobs, proved perfect for the role of executive secretary. Claire devised her own systems for classifying information, prioritizing tasks, and anticipating needs. In the third week, she scored her first big victory when Roberta was out on business and David urgently needed a quarterly report for a video conference. "It's in the second drawer of the right-hand file cabinet, in a yellow folder with a red label," Claire replied promptly. "I also prepared a digital copy and emailed it to you, with key points highlighted." David looked surprised, then smiled. "Impressive. How did you know I'd need it?" "I checked yesterday's conference agenda and saw that topic included. I figured it was best to have everything ready." It was a simple gesture, but the genuine approval in David's eyes made Claire feel, for the first time, that she might actually belong here. A month later, on a particularly busy afternoon, Camila Vasquez stormed in unannounced, demanding to see David. "He's in a closed meeting," Claire informed her calmly. "I can schedule you for tomorrow at 11 a.m. "It's urgent," Camila insisted, with her usual condescending tone. The launch campaign needs approval by the end of the day. I understand, Claire answered, unruffled. That's why I reserved a 30-minute slot for that specific issue at 5:30 p.m. The materials arrived from the agency last night and are already on his desk for preliminary review. Camilla blinked, clearly taken aback. How did you... It's my job to anticipate needs, Claire said simply. I also prepared a summary, comparing the 3 agency proposals, highlighting the budget and estimated impact differences. I thought it might speed up the decision-making. The marketing director was momentarily speechless. At last, she nodded stiffly. I'll be back at 5:30 then. As Camilla walked away, Claire noticed David watching through the slightly open door of his office. There was a glint of pride in his eyes that sent a wave of satisfaction through her. Later that same day, in the company cafeteria, Claire overheard one of the assistants talking to another. Did you see how she reorganized the entire filing system in just 1 month? Roberta took almost a year to set up something similar. And she managed to schedule that meeting with the Japanese clients that nobody could fit in the agenda. Claire pretended not to hear, but this time the whispers brought a discreet smile instead of insecurity. Slowly she was earning her place. How's Claire doing? David asked Roberta during one of their weekly meetings, exactly 2 months after Claire's hiring. Surprisingly well, Roberta answered honestly. She has a natural organizational skill that compensates for her lack of corporate experience, and she's a fast learner. I noticed Camilla finally stopped treating her like an intruder, Roberta laughed. After Claire rearranged the entire campaign approval schedule and shaved 2 weeks off the process. Hard to keep doubting her. David smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment that went beyond mere professional success. Seeing Claire earn respect on her own merits, overcoming the team's initial skepticism, brought a pride he hadn't felt in a long time. Does she still face any difficulties? He asked. A few, Roberta admitted. Corporate jargon still doesn't come naturally, and sometimes she needs technical terms explained. But what impresses me most is her honesty. If she doesn't know something, she asks. She doesn't try to fake it or stall like many others would. David nodded thoughtfully. That frank simplicity was exactly what had drawn him in from the start. In a corporate world full of people trying to be someone they weren't, Claire's authenticity was a breath of fresh air. I think we made a good choice, he concluded. What he didn't say, and perhaps wasn't ready to admit even to himself, was how his own routine had changed subtly since Claire joined. For the first time in years, David found himself paying more attention to the world around him, noticing little things he used to overlook, how Claire treated everyone with equal respect, regardless of rank. The genuine joy on her face when she talked to Theo on the phone at the end of the day, the quiet determination with which she tackled each new challenge. These were subtle lessons that made him question some of his own values and priorities. That evening, when David returned home, he found Helena and Theo in the garden, building what looked like a fort made of cushions and sheets. "Daddy, come see our cabin," Helena called, more excited than David had seen her in a long time. Normally, he would say he had work to do, emails to answer, calls to make. But something made him pause. Watching the kids, he remembered Claire's casual comment the other day. Theo says his favorite part of the day is building something together, even if it's just for 10 minutes. "Let me change clothes first," he replied, surprising his daughter. "Save me a spot in that cabin." As he climbed the stairs, he thought of Claire and the subtle transformation she had brought, not just to the company, but to his own life. By offering help to someone without expecting a financial gain, David had, without realizing it, received something far more valuable in return. The months passed, and autumn gave way to winter. What started as an impulsive gesture of gratitude from David Montgomery had turned into a surprisingly effective professional partnership. Claire wasn't just efficient as a secretary. She brought a different perspective to the company, a more direct, human approach to problem solving. But the deepest changes were happening outside the corporate environment. On Saturdays, It became tradition for Theo to visit the Montgomery mansion to play with Helena. At first, Claire always found excuses not to go. She had leftover work, needed to study, or had to clean her apartment. The truth was, she still felt uncomfortable in David's imposing home, as though she were an intruder in a world that wasn't hers. Until one rainy Saturday afternoon, when the driver arrived to pick up Theo, Helena was in the car. "Mom, Helena came too," Theo exclaimed, surprised and happy. The girl got out holding an umbrella too big for her size. The driver explained that David had requested both kids be brought back together because he wanted to speak with Claire in person. "He said it's important, ma'am," the driver added, noticing Claire's hesitation. With no other choice, Claire quickly changed clothes. Thankfully, months of stable work allowed her to buy a few more suitable outfits and accompanied the children back to the mansion. When they arrived, David met them in the living room. He seemed oddly nervous, rubbing his hands almost imperceptibly. "Thank you for coming, Claire," he said. "Kids, Margaret has prepared a special snack for you in the playroom. Why don't you head there while I talk with Claire?" The children needed no second invitation and ran off to the mansion's east wing. "Did something happen at work?" Claire asked, concerned. "No, not at all," David smiled, gesturing for her to sit. "Actually, I wanted to talk about the kids." Claire nodded, perching on the edge of the couch. Even after months working with David, she maintained a certain formality in his home. "Theo and Helena have become inseparable," David went on. "I've never seen my daughter so happy and open. Before your son came along, she barely smiled." Claire relaxed a bit, smiling in return. "Theo's the same way. He comes home every day recounting their adventures. Helena is the first real friend he's ever had." "That's why I wanted to suggest something," David said, leaning forward slightly. "Instead of just Theo coming here on Saturdays, how about you join us? Maybe we can switch off. One weekend here, another at your apartment." The suggestion caught Claire off guard. "My apartment? It's so small and simple." "Exactly," David interrupted gently. "Helena needs to experience other realities. Living in this bubble of privilege isn't healthy for her." Claire studied him curiously. There was a sincerity in his eyes that disarmed her. "Besides," he continued with a slightly shy smile, "it would be nice to have someone to talk to while the kids play." Thus began a new phase in the relationship between these two families. On the weekends when Helena visited Claire's small apartment, the girl was fascinated by the creative ways Claire and Theo found to have fun without spending money. She learned to pop popcorn on the stove, build cardboard box houses, and turn plastic bottles into imaginary rockets. David, initially out of place in the modest setting, soon found unexpected pleasure in the lack of formalities. There were no servers offering drinks in crystal glasses, no constant pressure to keep up appearances, just two adults talking about life while the children ran around the tiny apartment. "How do you manage it?" David asked one afternoon, watching Claire prepare a snack in her little kitchen. "Manage what?" "Make everything seem so simple." "Natural," Claire laughed, slicing fruit with the skill of someone who had worked in many kitchens. "When you have no other choice, you learn to simplify. We spend so much time wanting what we don't have that we forget to appreciate what we do have." David was silent, letting her words sink in. In his relentless quest for more profit, more expansion, more achievements, when was the last time he'd just been grateful for what he already had? "Helena is different now," he said after a moment, changing the subject slightly. "More confident, happier. Her teacher told me she even volunteered for a school presentation, something she's never done before." "Theo too," Claire agreed, pouring juice into simple cups. "His grades are better, and he's more social. I think they boost each other." "It's not just the kids who are changing," David observed, accepting the cup she offered. "You seem different from that tense woman who walked into my office on her first day." Claire smiled, leaning against the small kitchen counter. "Having some stability does that. For the first time in years, I'm not worried about making rent or buying medicine if Theo gets sick." "It's more than that," David insisted. "You've earned respect at the company. Even Camilla's, who was your biggest skeptic, now consults you before scheduling meetings with me. I still have a lot to learn. We all do, David replied, giving her a look that conveyed much more than his words. It was the first time Claire realized that perhaps she wasn't the only one being transformed by this unlikely friendship. On the Saturdays they spent at the mansion, David began actively joining in the children's games. Claire watched in surprise as he participated in Lego constructions or board games, activities Helena had said Daddy never had time for before. One afternoon, while the kids played in the garden, David showed Claire his personal study, a refined room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and an antique wooden desk. "It belonged to my father," he said, running his hand over the polished surface of the desk. "The only thing I kept of his." "Were you not close?" Claire asked gently, sensing the topic was sensitive. David hesitated, then sighed. He was absent, built an empire but lost his family in the process. "I promised myself I'd do it differently for Helena, but..." He made a vague gesture. "It seems I'm repeating the same pattern." "There's still time to change," Claire offered softly. "Helena loves it when you join her." "What was your father like?" David asked, clearly wanting to shift the subject. Claire smiled nostalgically. "The opposite of yours. He had no money or status, but he was always there. He worked as a building janitor, came home exhausted, but still found energy to tell me bedtime stories." "You were close to him then?" "Very. He died when I was 19. Heart attack." "I'm sorry. He taught me that quality time is priceless," Claire continued. "I try to give that to Theo even when I'm tired." David studied her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "You know what I realize, Claire? Despite all the money I've amassed, my life has always been lonely. Helena can have anything money can buy, but until she met Theo, she didn't have what truly matters: connection, genuine friendship." Claire didn't know how to respond. It was the first time she'd seen David so vulnerable, admitting a shortfall that wealth couldn't fix. "It's never too late to change that," she said at last, repeating the only truth she knew. "I'm glad you and Theo came into our lives," David replied with such sincerity that Claire looked away, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Claire's big professional opportunity arose when David announced an international technology conference Montgomery Tech would host. The event would gather investors and partners from around the world, crucial for launching the company's new artificial intelligence platform. "I want you to coordinate all the logistics," he informed Claire during a meeting. Claire swallowed hard. "Are you sure? This conference is really important. That's precisely why I need someone I trust completely." The conference would require 3 months of intense preparation. Claire threw herself into the project, coordinating teams, negotiating with vendors, organizing speaker schedules from different countries. It was her biggest challenge yet, but she was determined not to disappoint David's faith in her. 2 weeks before the event, at a final alignment meeting, Ricardo Mendez, the CFO and one of the company's oldest executives, made a remark that silenced the room. "Don't get me wrong, Montgomery. I acknowledge Ms. Silva's potential," he said, pausing deliberately before Claire's name. "But a conference of this magnitude, with investors of this caliber, wouldn't someone with more formal training be more appropriate? Someone with, say, a more solid resume?" The silence that followed was icy. Claire felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her face impassive, focusing on the notes in front of her. All her old insecurities swelled up again. "Interesting point, Ricardo," David said finally, with that controlled calm Claire had come to recognize as dangerous. "Especially considering you were present when we approved the budget, Claire managed to reduce by 22%, without compromising quality, or when she reorganized the schedule to fit in the CEO of Tech Fusion, which everyone said was impossible." Ricardo shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Of course, I'm not questioning her administrative competence, just..." "Claire isn't heading this conference by chance," David cut him off. "She's in charge because, in the past 6 months, she's demonstrated more efficiency, dedication, and strategic vision than many who've been here for years. And perhaps precisely because she doesn't have formal training, she can see solutions that others, limited by conventional thinking, can't. The CFO looked as though he'd swallowed something bitter, but he nodded stiffly. "If you're confident, then we're all on board." "I'm more than confident," David said, looking directly at Claire. "I'm proud of what she's done." After the meeting ended and the directors left, Claire remained seated, still processing what had happened. "You didn't have to do that," she said at last, once they were alone. "Do what?" "Defend me like that. Put your reputation on the line for me." David looked at her seriously. "First of all, it wasn't for you. It was for fairness. Second, I didn't jeopardize anything because I know exactly what you're capable of." He paused. "Claire, you've proven your worth countless times. Ricardo knows it. Everyone does. His issue isn't your competence. It's that you achieved in months what took him years to accomplish." Claire took in his words, feeling a mixture of gratitude and a more complex emotion she couldn't name. "Thank you," she said simply. "I won't let you down." "I never had any doubt about that," David replied with a smile. In that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't just a boss defending his employee. It was a man publicly recognizing the value of a woman who had come into his life by chance and become indispensable, not just at the office, but in ways neither of them was ready to admit. The mutual trust formed. There was something neither David's wealth nor Claire's determination could have forged alone. It was something only time, mutual respect, and shared vulnerability could create. It was the beginning of something neither had planned, but which both, perhaps, secretly hoped for. The international conference Claire organized was an absolute success. Executives from around the globe praised the flawless organization, the attention to detail, and the event's smooth flow. David received countless compliments regarding his team, and even Ricardo Mendes personally congratulated Claire for the exceptional work. In the following days, Claire sensed a subtle shift in the company's atmosphere. The same executives who once treated her condescendingly now consulted her about important decisions. Her opinion began to carry weight, and her name was spoken with respect in board meetings. But fate has a peculiar way of testing people right when everything seems to be falling into place. One ordinary Tuesday, Theo's teacher called Claire in the middle of the afternoon. "Mrs. Silva, this is Sandra from the school. Theo has a high fever and complains of severe stomach pain. We need you to pick him up as soon as possible." Claire's heart clenched. In 8 months at Montgomery Tech, she'd never needed to leave for personal reasons. She glanced at David's schedule, which was packed for the rest of the week. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said, trying to remain calm. She quickly organized the most urgent documents, updated the scheduling system, and drafted a detailed email for David, who was at an external meeting. Then she grabbed her purse and left in a hurry, explaining the situation to Roberta, who promised to cover any emergencies. At the school, she found Theo in the nurse's office, curled up in a chair, face flushed with fever and eyes lacking their usual sparkle. "Mom," he murmured weakly upon seeing her, holding out his arms. Claire hugged him, feeling the heat radiating from his small body. "I'm here, my love. Let's get you home and take care of you." In the taxi to their apartment, Theo curled up on his mother's lap, shivering despite the warm day. "My tummy hurts a lot," he whimpered, tears in his eyes. Claire tried to stay calm, but fear was already creeping in. It wasn't normal to see her energetic little boy so subdued. At home, she gave him a fever reducer and tucked him into bed, making sure he was comfortable before calling his pediatrician. The doctor recommended monitoring him for 24 hours and gave instructions on symptoms that would require immediate medical attention. Through the night, Theo's fever spiked and fell, but the abdominal pain persisted. Claire sat by his side, placing cool compresses on his forehead and offering sips of water. When her phone rang at 7 a.m., she answered without taking her eyes off her son. "Claire, it's David. Roberta told me what's going on. How's Theo? The genuine concern in his voice brought tears to Claire's eyes. He's not well, she admitted, voice shaking. The fever won't go down fully, and his stomach still hurts a lot. I'm taking him to the urgent care as soon as it's fully light out. Don't worry about work. Focus on Theo, David said firmly. Do you need anything? I can send my personal doctor to you. Claire hesitated. Normally she'd refuse out of pride, but the sight of Theo's pallor and his cries of pain through the night made her reconsider. If it's not too much trouble, I'd really appreciate a second opinion. It's done. Dr. Andrews will be there within the hour. Dr. Andrews, a middle-aged man with a kind face but sharp eyes, examined Theo thoroughly. His conclusion was swift and alarming. We need to get him to the hospital immediately, he said, already picking up his phone. His symptoms suggest appendicitis, and the condition seems to be progressing quickly. Claire felt the floor drop from under her. Appendicitis, hospital, surgery. Her mind spun, calculating costs, medical leave, days off work. Don't worry, the doctor assured, reading her thoughts. Mr. Montgomery has made all arrangements. An ambulance will be here shortly, and the team at St. Luke's Hospital has been notified. Before Claire could fully process the information, the ambulance arrived. Everything happened in a whirlwind, paramedics transferring Theo to a gurney, the sirens wailing through the streets, and their arrival at the private hospital where a team was already waiting. Tests were done in record time, confirming the diagnosis: acute appendicitis with a risk of rupture. The surgeon, a highly reputed specialist, explained the situation calmly but empathically. We need to operate immediately to prevent serious complications. It's a relatively simple procedure, but it's crucial that it be done right away. Claire nodded numbly, signing the consent forms with shaky hands. When she finally found herself alone in the waiting room while Theo was being prepped for surgery, the reality hit hard. Her son, her most precious treasure, was about to undergo emergency surgery. And though he was in the city's best hospital with top doctors, thanks to David, she was overwhelmed with fear. That's when she realized she hadn't told Helena. The girl would surely notice Theo missing at school and worry. Claire pulled out her phone to call David, but before she could dial, he appeared in the hallway. How is he? He asked immediately. They're taking him to surgery now, Claire managed, her voice trembling. Acute appendicitis. David nodded, sitting beside her. Dr. Andrews updated me. Theo's in excellent hands. Dr. Mendez is the best pediatric surgeon in the city. Claire tried to smile in gratitude, but her lips quivered, and tears came before she could stop them. They weren't just tears of worry for her son's health, but also tears of gratitude for David's immediate and unwavering support. Hey, it'll be all right, David said softly, taking her hand in his. Theo's strong. Soon he'll be running around with Helena again. How can I ever thank you for this? Claire asked through sobs. Sending your doctor, arranging the hospital, the specialists. You don't have to thank me, David interrupted. It's the least I can do for the two of you. Claire shook her head. It's not the least, David. It's so much more than any boss would do. And once Theo is better, I'll need to figure out how to pay for all this. The company's health plan has a waiting period for surgeries, and Claire, David cut in firmly, there will be no cost to you. Consider it handled, but no buts. Please, just focus on Theo now. The determination in David's gaze left no room for argument. Claire nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. As much as her pride protested, she knew she couldn't possibly handle these expenses on her own. The next few hours were the longest of Claire's life. David stayed with her the entire time, making sure she ate something, bringing her coffee, distracting her with light-hearted stories about Helena's childhood. His constant presence was an anchor preventing Claire from drifting into utter panic. Finally, nearly 4 hours later, Dr. Mendez appeared in the hallway, still wearing his surgical cap. The surgery was a success, he announced with a tired smile. We got it in time before the appendix ruptured. Theo is being moved to recovery now." Claire let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, her legs going weak as she leaned on David for support. "When can I see him?" she asked, voice trembling with relief. "In about an hour. Once he starts waking from anesthesia. He'll be groggy at first, might not recognize you right away." David thanked the doctor and walked a few steps with him down the hall, speaking words Claire couldn't hear. When he returned, he seemed more relaxed. "Let's get some fresh air while we wait," he suggested. "There's an indoor garden on this floor." Claire hesitated, reluctant to leave, but the doctor had said it would be an hour, and she did need a moment to steady herself. She followed David to a small glass-enclosed garden where tropical plants created a surprisingly calm haven in the hospital. They sat on a wooden bench, silent for several minutes as they soaked in the relief of the good news. "I've been through something like this," David said finally, breaking the silence. "Seeing you today, so distraught, brought it all back." Claire looked at him, surprised. In all these months, David had never talked about his wife's death except for brief mentions. "Was it with Helena?" she asked gently. "No," he replied, looking away. "With Carolina, my wife. It started with vague symptoms, fatigue, headaches. We thought it was just stress, working too hard." He paused, as if mustering courage to continue. "By the time we sought medical help, the tumor was already too advanced." Claire swallowed hard, realizing the depth of David's trauma. "Helena was only 2, he went on. "Carolina fought bravely for 6 months. But," his voice quavered slightly, "the worst part was feeling powerless. I had all the money in the world, the best doctors, yet I still couldn't save her." Instinctively, Claire placed her hand on his, a simple gesture of comfort that spoke louder than words. "Today, seeing your desperation," David continued, "I relived that feeling, but this time I could do something. I couldn't let you go through what I did, especially when help was possible." "I'm so sorry about Carolina," Claire said softly, "and thank you for sharing that with me. I know it's not easy." David looked at their hands, still joined on the bench. "You know what I learned after Carolina passed? That we're more fragile than we like to admit. I built a financial empire. I have power and influence, but none of that matters when it comes to the health of those we love." His raw honesty, the vulnerability he rarely showed, touched Claire deeply. In that moment, they weren't boss and employee, billionaire and secretary, just 2 people who knew the terror of possibly losing someone dear. "I guess I never truly thanked you for everything you've done for me and Theo," Claire said. "Not just today, but from the beginning. You changed our lives." David smiled, a genuine warmth lighting his eyes. "You two changed ours as well. Helena hasn't been the same since she met Theo. And he hesitated. "I've learned to see the world differently thanks to you." Something indefinable passed between them, a connection beyond words. But before either could say more, a nurse appeared. "Ms. Silver, your son is waking up. You can see him now." Theo remained in the hospital for 3 days. David insisted on providing the best accommodation available, a private room with space for Claire to sleep by her son's side. Helena visited him on the 2nd day, bringing drawings she had made just for him, promising to save every colorful bottle cap she found until he was back playing again. When they were finally discharged, a company car was waiting. To Claire's surprise, David was in the back seat. "I thought I'd ride along and see you both home, if you don't mind," he said. "Just want to make sure you're okay." At the apartment, David helped settle Theo into bed while Claire brewed a mild tea, following the doctor's orders. "Thanks for saving my life, Uncle David," Theo mumbled drowsily, still under the effects of painkillers. David smiled, tucking the blankets around the boy. "I didn't save your life, champ. The doctors did." "But Mom said you were the one who called the doctors," Theo insisted, in the simple logic of a child. David exchanged a glance with Claire, who had just entered the room with a tray of tea. "Your mother deserves the real credit," David said softly. "She never left your side, not even for a second. Once Theo fell asleep, Claire walked David to the door. "I'll have Roberta rearrange your schedule for another week," he said. "I want you to stay home until Theo is fully recovered." "But the new system transition can wait," David interrupted gently. "Some things are more important than work, Claire." "You taught me that." She smiled, exhausted but truly grateful. "I'll never be able to repay what you did for us." "It's not about repayment," David replied, gently holding her hands. "It's about taking care of those who matter." There was something deeper in his words, something both of them felt but weren't ready to name. "Thank you for being more than a boss," Claire said at last. "For being a friend, someone who really cares." David nodded, holding her gaze a moment longer than necessary. "Try to get some rest," he said. "I'll call later to check on you." When she closed the door behind him, Claire leaned against it, drained yet filled with a strange sense of peace. The past few days had been a nightmare, but they also revealed a truth she'd been trying to ignore. David Montgomery was no longer just her employer. He had become essential in her life, present at her most frightening moment, offering more than financial help, offering emotional support, understanding, vulnerability. And that, Claire recognized with both gratitude and apprehension, changed everything between them. The months following Theo's recovery brought subtle yet profound shifts for everyone. The hospital scare forced David to confront old traumas and fears, cracking the armor he had built over the years. At the same time, Claire experienced a new sense of security that went beyond steady income, the certainty that she was no longer fighting life's battles alone. One Monday morning, 2 months after the hospital episode, David surprised his directors with an unexpected announcement during the weekly meeting. "Effective immediately, we're implementing the Montgomery Family Program," he declared, the slides showing the new project's logo. "All employees will receive comprehensive health coverage with no waiting periods for surgeries or hospital stays, extended to their dependents. Additionally, we'll establish an on-site daycare and more flexible schedules for parents." Ricardo Mendez, the CFO, frowned as he mentally calculated the financial impact of these measures. "Montgomery, this will cost a fortune," he protested. "Our shareholders will be the first to reap the benefits," David calmly interrupted. "Employees who aren't worried about their children's well-being perform better." "This isn't charity, Ricardo. It's a strategic investment in our most valuable asset, our people." Standing by the meeting room door, Claire discreetly observed as she gathered documents to hand to David. An involuntary smile formed on her lips as she recognized how much David had transformed since she'd first met him. A strict executive focused solely on results, now speaking passionately about family welfare and quality of life. Later, after the directors had left, Claire entered to collect the meeting notes. "That program was inspired by Theo, wasn't it?" she asked, stacking the folders. David, who was typing on his tablet, looked up with a smile. "Partly, but also by you." He paused, choosing his words. "When I saw you nearly crumble with worry at the hospital, but still trying to figure out how to cover the bills, I realized many of our employees must be living with that same fear every day." Claire nodded, the memories of those terrifying moments still vivid. "The difference is, they don't have a boss who personally steps in to help," she pointed out. "Exactly." David closed his tablet and leaned back in his chair. "You know, I used to think helping just meant writing checks. I donate to dozens of causes, sponsor social projects, but I never really got involved. And now? Now I understand that real value isn't about the money we give away, but the opportunities we create and the presence we offer." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You and Theo taught me that." Claire felt her face grow warm. She still wasn't used to this new version of David, more open, more vulnerable, more willing to acknowledge external influences on his decisions. "Well, your employees will certainly appreciate the changes," she said, deflecting attention from herself, "especially single moms." "Like you were until a few months ago," David noted. Claire nodded, gratitude evident in her expression. "Like I was," she agreed quietly. David's transformation wasn't limited to corporate policies. In the everyday life of the company, people began to notice significant changes in the CEO's behavior. Once known for his formality and distance, he started making regular visits to different departments, learning employees' names, asking about their projects, and, most surprisingly, listening to their ideas. In the cafeteria, he sometimes sat at random tables to chat with operational staff over lunch. Even his traditional birthday celebration, once a formal event for top executives, became a relaxed picnic in the park with employees' families invited. "What have you done with the real David Montgomery?" Roberta joked one afternoon when she found the boss personally helping an intern solve a technical problem. "Perhaps he was never who we thought he was," David replied enigmatically before returning to his office. For Claire, watching this metamorphosis was like witnessing a hidden quality finally emerge, catalyzed by the right circumstances. David's interactions with Helena also evolved. He began scheduling regular dinners with his daughter, attending her school performances, and even started a Sunday Adventures tradition where they explored new places in the city. Theo, fully recovered from his surgery, often joined them, coming back home buzzing with stories about museums, parks, or ferry rides. Sometimes Claire accompanied them. Other times she used the time to study. She had resumed her college courses in administration, now on a full scholarship offered by the company's education program. "Mom, are you happier now?" Theo asked one night as she tucked him into bed. The question caught Claire off guard. "Why do you ask, son?" "Because you smile more. And you don't cry in the bathroom at night anymore." Claire felt a lump in her throat. She'd always thought she'd hidden her tears well, those late-night sobs when worry about the future became too heavy to bear alone. "Yes, I'm happier," she replied truthfully, stroking his hair. "We're safer now, you're healthy, and we have two friends who care about us." "Like Uncle David and Helena," Theo said with childlike directness. "Like Uncle David and Helena," Claire agreed, kissing his forehead. That night, for the first time in many years, Claire realized the chronic fear that had accompanied her, the fear of not being able to provide the basics, of failing as a mother, of losing everything to a twist of fate, had eased significantly. In its place grew a sense of stability, not just financial but emotional. December arrived, bringing the usual festive spirit to the city. The streets shimmered with colorful lights and holiday decorations that filled children and many adults with excitement. At Montgomery Tech, preparations for the year-end celebration were in full swing. Traditionally, the company held a formal dinner at a luxury hotel exclusively for executives and shareholders. But this year, David decided to completely change the format. It would be an outdoor party in the company's gardens, open to all employees and their families, with fun attractions for the kids, live music, and a relaxed atmosphere. "I want it to be memorable," he told Claire as they went over the final details. "A real celebration of people, not just numbers." Claire smiled on organizing the folders with vendor contracts. "It'll be perfect. The kids will love the inflatable park and the games." "By the way," David said with studied casualness, "we need to schedule our annual performance review before the party." "Sure," Claire agreed, checking the digital calendar. "You're free Wednesday at 10 a.m. "Perfect." There was something in David's tone that piqued Claire's curiosity, but she didn't press. Over the last few months, she'd learned to let him share information at his own pace. On Wednesday at precisely 10 a.m., Claire stepped into David's office for her annual review. She carried a detailed report of her work, achievements, and areas for improvement, a practice she'd followed since she became his secretary. "Good morning," David greeted, gesturing toward the chair in front of him. "Did you close the door?" Claire nodded, sitting down with her usual professional posture, despite the closeness they'd developed. "Before we begin formally," David said, "I want to say this year has been transformative for the company, for me, and I hope for you too." "No doubt," Claire agreed with a small smile. I never imagined, when Theo defended Helena in that schoolyard, that we'd be sitting here today. The famous butterfly effect, David mused. Small actions, big consequences. He opened a folder on his desk. Now, about your review. The board is extremely pleased with your performance, particularly your organization of the international conference and the new document management system. Claire nodded, grateful for the acknowledgement. As a result, David continued, we're offering you a significant raise, as detailed here. He slid a document toward her. And starting in January, you'll be promoted to Director of Institutional Relations. Claire's eyes widened as she picked up the paper with slightly trembling hands. The salary amount made her heart race, nearly triple what she currently earned. And a director-level position, something she'd never dreamed of achieving so quickly. I don't know what to say, she stammered, genuinely taken aback. It's neither a favor nor charity, David clarified, anticipating her usual worries. All the other directors voted unanimously after your last results presentation. Even Ricardo admitted your unique perspective has been invaluable. Claire took a deep breath, trying to contain her emotions. From house cleaner to company director in under a year, it was a trajectory that defied all odds. Thank you for the trust, she said at last. I'll work hard to live up to this. I know you will, David replied with a calm smile. You always exceed expectations. The day of the year-end party dawned sunny and mild, as if even the weather were conspiring to make the event a success. The sprawling gardens of Montgomery Tech had been transformed into a festive space with elegant tents, children's play areas, food stations, and a stage for live performances. Claire arrived early to oversee the final details. She wore a simple but stylish blue dress, bought just for the occasion, and her hair down, a departure from the strict bun she usually wore to work. Mom, can I go play with Helena? Theo asked, spotting his friend by the inflatable slides. Sure, but stay where I can see you, Claire said, watching him dash toward the girl. The two kids hugged enthusiastically, as if they hadn't seen each other in months, though they'd met the day before. They dashed off hand in hand toward the slides, laughing. They're inseparable, David commented, walking up behind Claire. It's like they were meant to be friends. Claire turned keen, smiling when she saw him dressed more casually than usual, light-colored slacks and a blue shirt, no tie. Some friendships do feel predestined, she agreed, as if the universe knew two people needed to meet. David looked at her for a moment, a certain glow in his eyes. I suspect not only their friendship was written in the stars, he said quietly. Before Claire could respond, Roberta appeared, needing confirmation about the speech order. The moment passed but left an unspoken promise hanging in the air, something both had sensed was growing for months but had yet to put into words. The party went off seamlessly. Employees and their families mingled in a laid-back atmosphere, a stark contrast to the company's traditionally formal events. David moved among the crowds, chatting with everyone regardless of position, a behavior unthinkable for the old Montgomery, as longtime employees whispered among themselves. Mid-afternoon, he stepped onto the small stage to give the official address. The crowd gradually fell silent, curious to hear what the CEO would say. Good afternoon, everyone, David began, his voice carried by the microphone. First, thank you all for coming. Your presence, and the presence of your families, means so much. This company isn't made of buildings or equipment. It's made of people, of dreams, and of stories that intersect every day. He paused, letting his gaze travel across the audience until it rested on Claire, who watched him with a soft smile. This has been a special year for Montgomery Tech. We hit record revenues, expanded into new markets, and launched innovative products. But our greatest achievement, I believe, was rediscovering our core values. David then gave a brief recap of how Theo had defended Helena in the schoolyard, and how that small act of courage set off a chain reaction. A 5-year-old boy taught me more about leadership and values than all the business schools I've attended, he confessed, drawing laughter from the crowd. He showed me that helping isn't just about giving money. It's about creating real opportunities and being there when it counts. His eyes found Theo and Helena sitting on the grass nearby, their hands still clasped. I look at these children, so different in background yet so alike in their humanity, and I ask, why do we build so many artificial barriers between people? David's voice grew slightly emotional. Social, economic, cultural differences. In the end, we're all driven by the same basic desires: safety, connection, meaning. Claire felt tears prick her eyes, touched by David's sincerity. Around her, many employees appeared moved as well, unaccustomed to such vulnerability from their CEO. That's why, David went on, beyond the usual bonuses everyone will receive today, we're announcing the creation of the Theo and Helena Foundation, which will offer scholarships and financial support to employees' children and to kids in our wider community. Because talent and potential exist in all social classes, and it's our responsibility to build bridges, not walls. The enthusiastic applause interrupted his speech. When the crowd finally quieted, David concluded, "One day, nearly a year ago, I asked a little boy what he wanted as a reward for helping my daughter. I expected him to say a toy, maybe a video game. But he looked me in the eye and said, 'I want a job for my mum.' That request changed not just his life and his mother's, it changed mine, and I hope it's starting to change this company." After the speech, as the band began to play and the celebration resumed, David found Claire near the refreshment table. "That was a beautiful speech," she said, still emotional. "It was honest," he replied simply. "Look at them," he added, gesturing to Theo and Helena running across the lawn chasing soap bubbles, their faces lit by the late afternoon sun. Two kids who should never have been separated by social differences, like so many others, Claire murmured. "Exactly." David's gaze rested on her with intensity. "You know, when you started working for me, I thought I was doing you a favor, giving an opportunity to someone less privileged. What arrogance, right?" Claire gave him a gentle smile. "A little," she teased softly. "The truth is, you two have given me far more than I could ever repay," he said, pausing as if carefully choosing his words. "You taught me the true value of things, Claire, and I'll be forever grateful." Any further words were cut off by Theo and Helena racing up,